This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we'll show you how to go from employee truck driver to savvy business owner. And we'll do it together because we're starting our own trucking company, Haulin Assets, so you'll get a front row seat through the whole process. Together with some experts in the field, we'll teach you how to set up a business, buy a truck, get your DOT and MC numbers, get insurance, and a lot more. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 17. I am Craig, your host, and over there,
it's Chris. Same guy, still here.
I know. Look, if they're not sick of you, then we'll keep going.
Hopefully they're still listening, yeah.
All right. Well, today we are finally, as we kind of teased last week, we are finally getting into the meat and potatoes of the operational stuff. A lot of what we've talked about previously has been before you get out on the road, how to start the company, how to manage all the paperwork and whatnot. Well, there's a little paperwork in this too, but what we're talking about today is actual operational stuff. This is what we've been looking forward to, your first 3 months on the road, and you've got your P&L ready to talk about today.
I do. Now you're using acronyms and not telling everybody what it means. So
that's P&L it's just because I'm so smart, Chris.
You are so smart.
I know business terms. I understand businessing very well.
So the P&L is your profit and loss statement. It's a very common report that, everybody from banks to whoever asks for, and they want to see. It shows, basically how much money you've made, how much you've spent in expenses, and then that most important number, the bottom line, what is your net income, which is essentially, I'm simplifying this a little bit, but what you put in your pocket and you get to take home at the end of the day.
Now, before we get to that, I'll just remind everybody of a couple of things. Go to haulinassetsllc.com to check out the full show notes for every episode, including this one. And so there will be, for this one, that's going to be pretty important, right? We're going to have a lot of things for them to check out from our conversation today. So haulinassetsllc.com is where you can do that. Also, check us out on Facebook. Find the Haulin Assets Facebook page, because what's our contest this week, Chris?
This should be kind of a fun contest. Before we get the contest, so I will post that actual profit and loss statement on the website. So as you're listening to this podcast, if you get a chance, pull it up so you can look at it and kind of go through it with us. But as far as the contest goes, this is going to be kind of a little bit more of a fun contest. We're basically asking for, when you're not driving your truck, what are you driving? Either what are you driving, or what is your dream vehicle to drive? Either one of them works.
Very nice. Do you have a dream vehicle, Chris?
I do. I actually, all growing up, it's changed recently.
Sure.
All growing up, it was a Dodge Viper. I always wanted to have a Dodge Viper. No, that was
mine as well.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Here's a deep cut for you. Do you remember the '90s television show Viper?
Oh yeah. That's good stuff.
Okay, so I assume we both watched the same program.
We must have. So yeah, that was always kind of my dream thing, and it changed recently. My dream vehicle changed several years ago to a Tesla. And it sounds kind of weird for a guy in the trucking industry that we kind of drink diesel, but I
really hope that's not true.
It's not, not so much, but because they're electric cars, they're completely different. And actually what made me fall in love with Teslas was not the cars, because to be honest with you, I'm not like a huge car guy or truck guy or anything like that. But the business side of things, Elon Musk and kind of what he did in transforming the auto industry and changing the auto industry, and probably accelerating the advent of the electric car, by 10 years at least. And just, taking something that people said, you cannot do this is impossible, you're not going to be able to make it happen, and actually doing it. That's what made me kind of fall in love with Teslas. And then I kind of fell in love a little bit more with the cars.
Yeah, so, well, I've heard that they are insanely fun to drive.
They are. So. And I bought a Model 3 last year.
Ooh.
And so own a Model 3.
This is the discount version for the plebs, right?
Yeah.
The Model 3.
Yeah. And before that, though, it's kind of funny. I'd owned and driven the same car for almost 17 years.
Wow. What was that?
It was a Honda Civic.
Nice.
Yeah. So cheap car, low maintenance, didn't cost a whole lot, and
Kind of
made
a
it so I
workhorse.
could, it was a workhorse, made it so I could, afford to do some of the things I've done business wise. I say that's a big part of why I've been able to do some of the things I've been able to do, is because I really managed my personal expenses and drove that same inexpensive car for a really long time. And then when I upgraded, I kind of upgraded big just a little bit.
Go
And
big or go home, Chris.
yeah, I love the Tesla. The torque on that electric car is just like nothing you've ever experienced. They're a lot of fun.
All right. Well, yeah, I say if you can go for your dreams, then why not?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
great. Okay, so let's get into the profit and loss subject today. I think we're going to be talking about the actual numbers here in just a moment, but kick us off on this, Chris. Let's start talking about P&L.
Before we get into the P&L, I want to talk, and this is obviously very related, but I want to go through an analogy or a parable, however you want to call it. This is a parable that a guy named Les Brown, a pretty famous motivational speaker, really kind of made famous over the years. But have you heard the story of that he tells, and other people tell it too, but I think he's the guy that really made it popular, of the Chinese bamboo tree?
I think I'm familiar with it, but you might have to refresh my memory.
Okay, so the Chinese bamboo tree, when you plant it as a seed, you plant the seed and it starts to germinate, but it just builds its root system. So it builds this big, elaborate root system, stores up energy, and basically sets the foundation for the bamboo shoot to grow. Do you know how long it does that for?
Months.
At least according to the story, it's actually years. So 5 years, it's just building its root system, storing up energy, and getting ready to shoot through the ground. And when it actually does, the bamboo grows a foot a day, a foot or more a day.
A day?
A day. And within 5 weeks, you've got a 90-foot tall bamboo shoot.
Is that true? Really?
So
according to Les Brown?
According to Les Brown and according to some of the other things I look at, I don't know if it's true. One thing I can tell you for sure that's true is when I was a kid, my dad was in the Army. And for 2 years, we were stationed in Panama. And this was in my teenage years. My favorite place we ever lived. I loved it. But I remember we had a bamboo that was growing right outside of my window, and it would grow easy 6 inches in a day. And we would mark it kind of like you do when you're a kid and you mark how tall you grow. We would mark that bamboo every day and see how tall it would grow. And it would grow 6+ inches in a day. It's crazy.
Wow. And that's day in, day out?
Day in and day out for while it's growing. Yeah.
That's really cool. So I think I can see where you're going with this, where a lot of what we're doing as you pre-operationally and then in these first few months with the company, you're laying a foundation, you're building that root network, making sure that you're doing things right, getting all the ducks in a row would be the other cliche that we can use for this. But eventually, what you're saying is it may not take off right away and grow a foot a day, but it's about laying that foundation. Am I right?
It is. It's about laying that foundation. And I really think if you look at this story and this analogy, there's 5 lessons that we can really learn from it. One, your results from your efforts are not always going to be obvious, and they're not going to be obvious right away. And as we're talking this P&L stuff and a few things, we're gonna kind of relate some of this to that. Number 2 is building a business takes time. Just like it takes 5 years for that bamboo to set its foundation. It's the same thing with business. It takes time for that to happen. Number 3 is you have to nurture the business. And that's where a lot of this, the money and the profits that we're going to talk about today is what you're going to use to nurture, to fertilize, to water that business so that when, as time goes on, it's eventually going to shoot up and do great. And number 4 is the more you nurture it, the faster it's going to grow. So, the more of those profits you put back into the business, the faster it's going to grow, the bigger it's eventually going to get. Then number 5, probably most important, is just be patient. And I can really relate a lot of this to me and my businesses. The first business that my dad and I bought, Progressive Reporting, we went about 4 years before we really saw good, consistent profits coming out of it and some of that growth. But we cultivated and grew it and did things, made sacrifices in those first 4 or 5 years. And now it's blossomed into a bunch of other things that have been really good. And we're starting to see some of that incredible growth, just like you do with that 90-foot bamboo tree.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're talking about, yeah, I was joking earlier about the Tesla for plebs, but if you want to buy a Tesla, you're gonna have to put in the groundwork years earlier, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
no, that's congratulations on being able to achieve your dream car, Chris.
Yeah.
In seriousness, that's
It's
great.
fun. Yeah.
And so this is relevant, extremely relevant to the conversation here because we're going to be going over these numbers, and it could be that if somebody takes a look at these first 3 months, they go, "Oh, that's it," you know. But what you're saying is, hey, we're laying the foundation. We're looking to the future, not for an immediate earth-shattering win,
Yeah.
right?
It's you can't you that instant gratification in any kind of business, you're typically not going to get it. Now, I feel like that those first 3 months have actually been really, for the most part, all in all, pretty good months. We have made money. I'm pleasantly surprised by what it is, but you also have to realize, that profit that we've made, you can't just pull it all out of the business and pocket it and put it all in your pocket. So, one of the things that we've talked about a little bit in the past, changing that mindset from a driver to a business owner. And this is another really good comparison that I like to make with people is when you're a driver or you're an employee for somebody else, that paycheck that you bring home, if you want to, you really can spend every last dime of that paycheck. You're going to live paycheck to paycheck, but you're not going to probably get yourself into trouble because next month or next week you're going to get another paycheck and it's going to be for a similar amount and everything's going to be hunky-dory and good. And you can really spend all that without getting into too much trouble. It's not the same with the business because you're going to see, big volumes of money coming in, I'll kind of do a little bit of a spoiler alert, but on average, those 3 months, we're bringing in $20,000 a month, which is a lot of money, but you can't just go out and say, okay, well, I'll bet you I can take 10,000 of that out and then you just use that other 10,000 to pay for my expenses. Well, you just can't do that.
Not going to work that way.
It's not going to work that way. You've got to be disciplined and careful. And even that profit, you can't necessarily take all of that profit out and go spend it or you're going to get yourself into trouble.
No, that all makes sense. So as we are inching closer and closer to actually digging into these numbers here, let me ask you a basic question, and that is, how did you make this? How does somebody go about actually creating a P&L statement? Do you use a specific software? Are there techniques you recommend?
Yeah,
all that sort of thing.
There's a lot of different software out there that you can use it. I mean, you can do it on a spreadsheet if you wanted to. Bad idea. I use QuickBooks. And really just because that's what I've been using for a long, long time. I actually use another program for some of the real estate stuff that I own because there's not as many transactions that go into it. It's called Wave, and it's free. QuickBooks you're going to spend money on. Wave is free, but it's not as user-friendly as QuickBooks, and it doesn't have all the features that QuickBooks does, not as sophisticated. So for that reason, a company like a trucking company that's a little more complicated, I've liked QuickBooks better.
Okay. What does QuickBooks cost?
To be honest with you, I can't even remember roughly. I want to say about $20 a month or so.
Okay. So
roughly around that. Bad. It's not a crazy expense and well worth it because these reports, as simple as they seem, they're really critical to a business because one, they show you how much money you make. Two, if you ever want to go get a loan at a bank, you need to be able to provide them financial information. And this being able to take to them a clean profit and loss statement or a clean balance sheet shows them that you've got the sophistication necessary to run a good business. And that goes a long way, especially in our industry where a lot of owner operators just don't take the time or have the experience or the ability to be able to do that. And if you can produce that, that's going to put you way above your competition.
And I can say, as somebody who used to work in a bank, a couple of banks, that QuickBooks, actually, this is another plug for QuickBooks. This episode apparently brought to you by
QuickBooks.
No, but QuickBooks actually syncs with a lot of online banking software, and so it's a good way for you to manage both sides of that.
Yeah, it's nice because you don't have to manually enter every transaction because QuickBooks can pull that data from your bank account and makes it pretty simple.
All right, very good. So, all right, let's just, going forward, assume we're talking about QuickBooks, but there are other softwares out there that people can try.
Absolutely.
If they're
doesn't
not,
have to be QuickBooks.
Yeah, but that's what we're probably going to talk about today, just to set that expectation. We're going to assume we're using QuickBooks. Okay.
And it's really important. Like, it's not it's using a software like QuickBooks is not as simple as just going in and entering your expenses or downloading everything from the bank account. To really be able to produce a good report, you need to understand a little bit about accounts and charts of accounts. Like there's different types of accounts. There's an expense account that you manage your expenses in. There's asset accounts that you put your assets like your truck and everything into. And you need to be able to understand that. The nice thing is you don't have to have an accounting degree to do that. A lot of like community schools, community education centers will put on monthly or every other month they'll have the basics of QuickBooks or the basics of accounting software where you can learn how to do a lot of that stuff. And a lot of times, like I know our community in this area has those. They put them on at the high school and you can pay for those. They just run them at night and they're cheap. They're like $50 and you can learn how to do a lot of this stuff.
Nice. Okay. No, that's a great option. I wouldn't have guessed that. So should we dig into this?
Yeah, let's dig
P&L
into the
statement
P&L
now?
for sure.
All right. Where do you want to start?
Let's start at the beginning. So the P&L is basically divided into three categories. You've got an income category, you've got an expense category, and then you've got the important part at the bottom that's your net income. So if you look at Haulin Assets P&L, there's the income category, and I basically listed 4 areas of income where I've earned income. So the first one is detention fees. So if I've received money because I got detained somewhere, I categorize that as detention income. And then the second one is driver assist. So if I've had to, this happened one time where I had to help unload a load, I got paid $100 for doing that. So that's another income item. The big one is freight hauled. So, the what I get from actually delivering load, I consider that freight hauled income. And then the last one I have is when I pay a lumper fee and then the broker reimburses me for that, I call it lumper fee reimbursement income.
Right. And I'm going to take this opportunity to remind everybody that if you go to the show notes, you can follow along with all of this.
Yep.
So we're going to do our best to make it listenable so that you can understand what it is that we're talking about. But it would be very helpful if you go to haulinassetsllc.com. You can check out this statement so you can follow along with exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. So if you look at May's, I earned some detention income. It was only $170. I didn't earn any driver assist in May, and then I earned almost $22,000 in freight hauled, and then I got another $450 in lumper fee reimbursements.
All right, well, sweet, $22,000. You're rolling in it, Chris.
Rolling in it.
Wait, maybe we talk about the next section.
Yeah, that number doesn't become quite so good once we get into the next section and we start talking about expenses.
So, and expenses, as I'm looking at this is broken down much more granularly than your income.
It is. There's a lot more
places.
Expenses line items. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if we want to run through every single line item, but maybe we can talk about the different categories.
Yeah. We'll at least talk about the categories. So you take the first ones, like is mostly bank charges and fees. So to have a checking account, and really where a lot of that comes from is running your fuel card. Every time you use your fuel debit card, you get charged a fee to use that. So that's where most of those come from. So $100 in May for that. And there's a few other things, but you've got that one. Then I had some compliance expenses. Then the next big one that let's really talk about is driver pay.
Okay.
So I pay myself just like I would another driver. And everybody if you're doing this, you should do the same thing. If you're also driving the truck, you should pay yourself just like you would another driver. And so what I recommend people do, and this is like, if you could learn one thing out of this podcast, this is probably one of the most important pieces of the podcast. I feel like really strongly, that you should pay yourself just like you were getting paid before. And you don't take for the first year or two, you don't take any more money out of that business than what you were earning as a driver working for somebody else. So what I've done in this situation, for a newer driver like me, I'm paying myself 42 cents a mile. And that's a pretty
reasonable,
pretty
cost.
Normal over the road driver wage, 42 cents a mile.
Okay.
And so that's how I'm calculating this, is I'm paying that 42 cents a mile. Then on top of that, there's payroll taxes the business has to pay, and you'll see that. And that's roughly 8.5% of the driver pay is what those taxes calculate out to be.
Gotcha.
Then below that, you'll see the dispatching and factoring fee. My dispatcher and my factor are kind of one and the same, and so I've categorized that. I pay that fee out as one fee, and it covers both the dispatching and the factoring. Then next, you'll see the different categories of fuel. Then you go down in different categories of insurance, and then there's just a bunch of other interest paid. So that's interest on my truck loan and my trailer loan. Then there's just most of this rest of this stuff is just really kind of miscellaneous.
Yeah, it looks
stuff.
like odds and ends, maintenance stuff, job supplies, scale fees, that sort of thing. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Seems pretty miscellaneous, but straightforward if you're looking through it.
It is. Yep.
So, all right, now we get to the exciting part, I guess, which is you've got
you
your
total
total expenses.
You total all those expenses up, and
then we're going to get our costs. So what's our total expenses? We talked about 22, I guess when you add it up, 22,500 in your total income. Expenses comes out to just over 18. So our net operating income, now you've got two lines here, net operating income and net income. Now I notice as I'm looking at that these are the same number.
In our situation, they're the same. And really where that big difference would come into, and I'm not going to get into this because
this isn't an accounting
it's not
podcast.
An accounting podcast. and the difference is when you're also using cost of goods sold, which to simplify things, I'm not using cost of goods sold. Because cost of goods sold are pretty similar to expenses. It's just an expense that's tied directly to the product or service you're producing. So in a lot of situations, fuel would probably be considered a cost of goods sold. But you're really getting, I think, more complicated than you need to be for
a little too granular.
Yeah. So because those are the same, I'm not using cost of goods sold. Those are going to come out the same. Net income and net operating income are going to be the same every time.
So in May, just over $4,000 in net income. Now, this is profit minus expenses, but the encouraging thing here is that you've already paid yourself. That's part of your expenses. And so you're not looking at that number saying, oh, no, this is all I have left to live with. This is that fertilizer you're talking about, right? It goes back into the business and feeds that bamboo tree.
And that's exactly right. So that's above and beyond your driver pay. So if you really wanted to see what you made as a business owner, you'd probably add those two together. But with that being said, I wouldn't even do that because part of that net operating income, that profit, you're going to want to put back into the business. And in next week's episode, that's what we're really going to go into. Okay, now that you've made some money, what are you going to do with that money, and how is that money best spent? Because you should not take all that home and go buy your dream car. It's not time for that yet. That day will come. That day will come, but it's not time for it yet. If you want to make sure that business is going to stay healthy and it's going to be able to continue to grow and get strong, you cannot spend all that money.
Right. And I'm glad you headed me off, because that was going to be my next question is what do we do with this $4,000 in profit? But we will get there. So let me ask you another question. So that was our May numbers. But when I look over at June, our gross profit in June, $18,500. Total expenses, just under $18,500. So the total profit in June, instead of over $4,000, you got $110 in net income. At this point, do you start freaking out?
No, because shit happens. You might have to beep that out because we're a friendly,
we're family
friendly.
Yeah. All your kids who are on the long haul with you, they're all listening to this too,
but
right?
It happens, and you're going to have a bad month. And what happened that month was I had to pay for the repair from when that damn deer ran into my truck. So that's why the profit was low that month, is because if you look and go up onto the repairs line, there's a $2,736 repair from Bambi.
Good heavens, $2,700 from a deer
to fix Bambi. That remember, I didn't hit Bambi. Bambi hit me. I want to clarify that.
Of course,
I don't consider that an at-fault accident because Bambi ran into the side of the truck. No damage on the front. It was all on the side.
As long as the deer doesn't hit my face on the side of the truck, one day it's going to be there, Chris. So I'm looking forward to it. Okay, all right, interesting. So you're not freaking out, and the next month reflects that. If we go to July, it pops back up. Not quite the same as May, but $3,700 in net income kind of reflects no deer were harmed in the making of this profit and loss this month. So
no, only in June's profit and loss did we hurt any animals.
Oh, very good. Okay, so good. I feel like we've worked our way through it. Again, one more time, just for people who are listening, that was a lot of numbers we threw at you and a lot of categories to go through. It's not the most audible kind of content for us to try to explain. And so once again, HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Check out this profit and loss statement, and you can follow along with what we're talking about here and make it a little bit easier on yourself. Wait till you're off the road for that, maybe.
And this episode definitely is best consumed looking at that spreadsheet as we're kind of walking through this so you can see it. We've, for those of you who haven't seen the actual printout of the P&L, we show all 3 months plus a total for the 3 months. You can see that it'll show everything, every line item. We're trying to be as completely transparent in this as we possibly can so that you get to see exactly what it looks like to own a one truck trucking company. And the other thing to keep in mind too is this is really the first 3 months that this business was open. A lot of people would love to start a business and be profitable within the first 3 months, which we have been, which is really a remarkable and phenomenal thing. And take into consideration, this is the first 3 months when it's the hardest to find loads. And this includes a couple of the months in the summertime, which are down months for the trucking industry as a whole. And so I'm super encouraged by how this turned out.
And I've been thinking about this a little bit ever since you sent these numbers my way and I was looking at them. I was thinking about some of the advantages that you have, right? You've worked in this industry for a while. You've been supporting trucking professionals for a long time. So you've been around this stuff. And so you've built up this support system with other professionals in the industry who you can go to and you use them to help your business grow. And it's that support system that's allowed you to do what you've done. Not everybody's going to be so lucky and have those first 3 profitable months, but and this is just shameless self-promotion for this podcast. I hope people forgive me, but that's essentially what we're doing is we're trying to give people a support system if they want to go and try and make it on their own the way that you're doing with your trucking company. That's what this podcast and what the website and what all these other things that we're providing for them are meant to do is, you've been working in this industry for years, you've built that support system, and now you're showing people how to go about getting that sort of support, right?
Absolutely. But in reality, I have honestly tried to run this business as if I didn't have a lot of that experience. Like I haven't used my connections to find better paying loads. Like every single load that we've hauled up to this point has been found on a load board.
Nice.
We haven't gone out, I've got some relationships. I actually have clients that are shippers. I haven't gone out to them and asked them for loads. I may, as time goes on, start to do some of that because that's how a trucking company should be run. You shouldn't get all of your loads just from load boards. You need to go out and get them from other areas because those are typically higher paying loads. And I'll start to do that as time goes on. But at this point, I've tried to make this project match what anybody else should be able to do out there.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to disadvantage yourself, but you're also not going to take any advantages that somebody else wouldn't be able to have as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been illuminating. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. Despite all these numbers in a handy little spreadsheet, I actually enjoyed this. It was good to go over, so I hope people will go check it out as well at HaulinAssetsLLC.com. Chris, anything else before we cut and run?
That's it. I need to get out of here so I can hit the road.
All right, well, let's do it. We will see everybody for episode 18 when we dig into what to do with that net income. And I will see you then, Chris.
Sounds good. That's going to be another super important episode, and look forward to it.
Check, check.
How do I sound?
Oh, silky.
Still as good as ever?